Hello, this is Father David, here with day 6 of Great Lent 2024. We have on this Saturday, the first Saturday of Great Lent, is a gospel reading. Now, I said yesterday that we were going to be reading on the weekends from the gospel, from the New Testament. And why is that? Because Lent is supposed to be a penitential time. Father David, I thought we were in the Old Testament in a kind of exile, like moving back into the time before Christ's glorious appearing and the mercy that he gave us. We are. However, Saturday and Sunday continue to be, Saturday being the day of rest, Sunday being the Lord's Day. Both of these days are days when divine liturgies can be celebrated. It's the weekdays especially that are of this penitential nature. So we're reading from the Gospel of Mark in the 2nd chapter, verse 23, through chapter 3, verse 5. It's important because we need to compare. This is one of the 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But we're reading out of Isaiah during the week, and Isaiah is often called the 5th gospel. And this was the case that when you had the first Christians, of course, St. Paul, this sort of thing, they would not do what many Christians today would do to a lot of their audiences, try to reason from the reality of the resurrection, these sorts of things. Or maybe through theology or philosophy. They would go to the Old Testament and speak of the way that Christ is the fulfillment, the last word of the Torah, the Jewish law, and that he is the one that the prophets had prophesied. And Isaiah is one, of course, we'll read the famous, passages from Isaiah 7, Isaiah 53, that clearly speak of Christ, and we read them in our services. But the Fathers and really the New Testament quotes the prophet Isaiah quite a lot in terms of speaking about how he is the promised one. But we're going to take a look at what Christ is saying here and see how it is not a departure from the truth and the religion that that the prophet Isaiah is speaking of, but the very same God of Israel, the very same concerns and the very same teachings, just brought to their fullness, their fulfillment. So we begin chapter 2, verse 23. Now it happened that he went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And as they went, his disciples began to pluck the heads of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" Now, on the one hand, you do have to understand, like collecting grain, harvesting, that was work. You didn't do that on the Sabbath. But the minutia that this had been reduced to was even going by and picking, grain to eat as you went. If you were on a long journey, you were hungry, this was sort of a thing that you would do, but they considered that picking grain, plucking the heads of grain. Why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath? You are breaking Torah. You are breaking the law, the Torah of Moses that defines us as a people. But he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and hungry, and those with him? How he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the showbread, which is not lawful to eat except for the priests, and also gave some to those who were with him? And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." So this first part, we're talking a couple of things. One, to understand that the need to meet the needs of those who, David was being chased by Saul. He was being persecuted. He was going to be hunted down and killed. And he did this in a moment of desperate need to survive. And it was not something that was condemned, but even more, you have not only David, but he's also pointing someone greater even than David is here. And in another place, in another gospel, he would say, someone greater than Solomon is here. So he's trying to get their attention. He's like, if you, sort of like he would say to the woman at the well, Fotini, if you knew who it was talking to you, you would understand that I am the fulfillment of this Torah, this commandment. It said he entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. So they watched him closely, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, step forward. Then he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. So they were not willing to stretch out their understanding of the law. They were only concerned with keeping the minute letter of the law and not the actual application, which Isaiah would tell us is that the faces of the poor that we read about yesterday would not be ground into the dirt, that they would not have to continue to suffer. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. So Christ has done something that is now considered work on the Sabbath, but it is done in a desire to restore to wholeness, which is the purpose of the Torah, is to take the people of the covenant and give them a sort of wholeness by the observance of the law, the Torah of the Jewish people. Now, it strikes my memory when in another place, Christ speaks to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the experts, the doctors of the law, and says, you're so particular to get exactly 1/10 of your dill, your mint, your cumin, all these spices that you have from your spice rack. You tithe out even 1/10 of that. You measure it on the scales, and you make sure so closely to get an exact tithe, 1/10, that you'll offer. You're so fastidious, but you neglect the weightier matters of the law: justice, truth, mercy, all of these things. And then you know what he says: you ought to do the latter as well as the former. He didn't say, don't worry about all that ceremonial stuff. And don't worry about all that liturgical stuff. Don't worry about all that canonical stuff, the law, the letter of the law. Throw it out if it's inconvenient. The only important thing really is that we love each other. We kind of feel good about each other. No. Again, looking back on it, it's an anachronistic thing. It's very orthodox, of course. Back then it was Judaism. And we would say that the church is still Israel, but it's a both and, He's saying that there's an order to this. Not that we shouldn't be concerned with keeping our faith the way that it was handed down to us, but that there's an order to this. That we should understand that just because something isn't the weightier matter of the law doesn't mean that we just can optionally throw it out if we need to, or want to, rather. But we also, much worse, would be to focus in on these matters of the law, these letters of the law, and ignore the weightier matters of it. So let us keep this understanding of the understanding of Christ showing us the spirit of the law that we get in Isaiah from what we've been reading before, and continue to see in him the final word of the Jewish law. So Lord God bless you. Lord willing, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.